Hey Laura, and welcome to the voice notes from the Organized Homeschool. I'm super excited to chat with you. I already know we're about to learn so much from you, so looking forward to it. But let's jump right in with you kicking things off with an introduction. So just tell me more about you, about your homeschool, about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Maybe why you started homeschooling, maybe a bit about your homeschool style, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited. As you said, my name is Laura. I'm from Rivercrest Homeschool on Instagram, and I'm excited to be here. We have been homeschooling for about 8 years. I've got 3 kids, a rising first grader, a rising fifth grader, and a rising seventh grader, which just blows my mind. I can't believe we've gotten here so fast. We've been homeschooling for 8 years, and I've been in education for right at 15 years. I was a high school social studies teacher. I taught face-to-face in the classroom until my second child was born, and then I taught for our district's virtual academy for about 8 years. Right until about 2 years ago, in fact, I was teaching online and homeschooling my own kids. So I'm not teaching outside of homeschool right now, which is a welcome break. I do miss it sometimes, but it is a welcome break for sure, and it allows me to have more time with my babies, which I enjoy. We originally started homeschooling when my oldest was in preschool. We were kind of like thinking about homeschooling. It had really never been on my radar, but I just did not. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. I had a baby and then a 4-year-old, and we were looking at homeschooling, and we were looking at the public school option. We have a good public school that we're districted for. We went and did the tour. Everyone was so nice, but I just thought, like, wow, I'm just not ready for my kindergartner to go all day long in schools. And so we did the tour. They talked so much about how much screen time they were going to have and how computer savvy they were going to be, and I was just kind of turned off by that. And I was like, well, what about outside? I want them to play outside, and have more time to be bored and explore and be creative. And so we said that we would homeschool at least for kindergarten, and we loved it so much we just kept at it, and here we are, and she's going into 7th grade. So we started homeschool just for kind of the efficiency of it. I always joke with my best friend, his kids are in public school, and I say, like, you spend so much time in this pickup line going to pick up your kids and drop them off, and I could be done with homeschool by the time you get done with that. And so I looked at the line, and I was like, nope, I do not want to send them, wait in line all day, send them to school, come home after waiting in line again to pick them up, and have to do homework with them and then shuttle them off to extracurriculars. And so I joke that the school drop-off line is why we chose to homeschool, but there is some legitimacy to that. We keep homeschooling just because it works for our family. It's very efficient. We've been able to meet so many homeschool families that have gone before us. I've been able to see how the older students use their time, whether that be working or babysitting or doing apprenticeships, and it has just opened my eyes to the possibilities of being able to get your schoolwork done in half a day and then have the afternoon to go and work or to start a business. My oldest daughter started her own jewelry making business that she and her sister do. And that is all because they had the time to do it with homeschool. So that is why we continue to homeschool. Plus, there's nothing like, we live in Eastern North Carolina, and there's nothing like being able to go to the beach for a week when the public schools have gone back to school that like last week of August, and we have like the whole beach to ourselves because everything's still open because Labor Day hasn't come yet. So it's amazing, and that's one of my favorite parts about homeschool is to go to the beach on vacation after all the public school kids have gone back to school. So that is a check in the for homeschool column for sure. We kind of have a little bit of every homeschool style. We're pretty eclectic. I guess our primary style would be classical education. We do participate in classical conversations in a community here in our town. So a lot of what we do is classical, but then we also pull in unit studies for our family subjects like science and history. We're pretty traditional when it comes to math. I would also say we use a little bit of Charlotte Mason too for history. So we are kind of all over the place when it comes to what homeschool style we are. We use a bit of everything, I think.
Okay, thank you for sharing all of that. I am so thrilled to learn from you and get to hear about your homeschool now and in the past and your experience and all of that. I can totally relate to your feeling of like, I don't want to wait in the car line. As someone who I never did wait in the car line, but I worked the car line as a teacher and it was a mess. It's like, I never want to be a part of this. So it's a funny joke, but it's real too, right? And I love your reasons for continuing and getting to see the other homeschool kids and your daughter as she's like started her entrepreneur journey, which I want to talk about at some point. So I'm going to get there. But first, I would love to know, like, what does a typical day look like for you all now? So I guess last year, since they're recording this in summer, or even like what you're planning for it to look like this upcoming year. But then I'm also curious about, what did it look like for you to be a virtual teacher and homeschool? What was a day like for that? Because I recently did a post about working homeschool moms, and it's real. There's a lot of people doing both. So I would love to hear what the day looked like then when you were teaching and homeschooling 2 years ago and now, or like last year, or what you're planning for your day to look like now.
This is a great question, and I love hearing about what other people do in their homeschool lives and learning from that. Man, especially when I was first starting out, that information was just golden because it helped me figure out what I wanted to do and what would work for our family. So a typical day for us, I wish we were early risers, but we're just not. So we are typically up and eating breakfast around 7:30, and then by 8 we'll start our homeschooling day. So we'll start kind of quickly as a family, whatever we need to cover together as far as like our calendar, maybe a family devotion or what's in store for the week. And then we're going pretty hardcore by 8:30 on our individual subjects. So each of my kids do math, language arts, and foreign language on their own. I mean, I'm helping them, but they each have their own separate curriculums and grade levels that they're working on. So we'll start with independent work. I find that those subjects require their best attention and focus, so we go ahead and get those out of the way. And then once we are done with our individual subjects for the day, we'll come back together for family time, which is usually more fun subjects, things like history and science and art, music. And so I don't have to have their best attention during those because it's engaging and fun and they're interested. So when we're doing our independent work, all that kind of ends at different times. Obviously, my 7th grader and 5th grader are working on their math separately. I'm working with my 1st grader on his math. He's going to finish his schoolwork before them because he has less of it, just because he's younger. And so he'll go off and play, and then I'll call them all back together and we'll do whatever family subject we're doing that day. So like Monday might be history, Wednesdays could be science, Fridays could be art. It just depends on the day which family subject we're doing. So that's what works for us. And then we'll have lunch together. My husband's able to come home for lunch, fortunately, which works out great because we rarely get to eat together as a family for dinner. Everyone's kind of going here and there. So the girls are in swim and they're doing musicals, and my son is doing baseball, or my husband's playing on his co-ed softball team, or I've got book club. There's always something in the evenings. And so it's not very often that we get to sit down as a family for dinner. So I love that we can sit down together for lunch every day. That's kind of our family meal time. And then after lunch, we'll do chores, we'll have quiet time. They can play quietly in their rooms, they can read. It's screen-free during quiet time. That's important for us. Or they could work on their business. Like I said, my oldest daughter would work on jewelry or take any orders. It just kind of depends. Or if they didn't finish what they needed to in the morning time, then we will come back to that. We'll run errands, get ready for dinner, and off to all the activities. So that's kind of what our typical homeschool day looks like. When I was working, man, that was really hard. I was teaching online. Fortunately, I didn't have to teach synchronous lessons all the time. Most of what I did was asynchronous learning, and so I still met with students one-on-one, typically during the evenings, but I would always block that time off in the afternoon. So we would do our homeschool in the morning, have lunch, then during quiet time I would get a couple of hours in of work, and then after they went to bed, I would finish up my hours. But I would say probably when my son was about a year old, I just have to be honest, it was very hard to maintain full-time working hours and homeschool. And, I was struggling with that mentally and even physically. I was exhausted. And so my husband was so supportive, and we just talked about it, and we wrote down some things that kind of had to take place in order for me to be successful at continuing to teach and homeschooling our own kids well. And so one of those things was to hire a babysitter. And so we hired a high school homeschool student who came in the afternoon 3 days a week. And my husband's off on Friday afternoons. And so I would just lock myself in my office and get to work. I would get, 4 or 5 hours done in the afternoon. And then after bedtime, when the kids were all tucked in, I would get, 2 or 3 more hours in each night. And so that's how I did it. It required a whole lot of self-discipline for us to get our schoolwork done in the morning and all the things we need to do in the morning so I could get my hours in the evenings. And I don't miss that part. I do miss teaching, but I don't miss working full-time hours in addition to homeschooling, because that's really hard. I just want to add that it can be done. So for everyone who's listening who is working or thinking about working, just to supplement the family income, it can be done. I did it for 8 years. I would do it again if I had to, but it was hard. We just had to put a lot of boundaries in place and a lot of things in place and really adhere to them to make sure everything in the rest of our life went smoothly.
Okay, thank you for coming back with that last point, because I think it's so true. Is like, it totally can be done. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but also with the right system, structures, boundaries, and support, like the babysitter who you hired as an example of support, like it can make it a little bit easier and more feasible to sustain it and keep it going. I mean, you did it for 8 years. That's amazing. And you do it again. You wouldn't choose it, but you would do it again if you had to, and I think we all would. And you were full-time. A lot of working homeschool moms might be choosing to do part-time, which makes it a little bit less strained to balance both. But I'm very grateful for you sharing your perspective and your experience, because I think there's plenty of people out there who will come across this episode and be like, okay, that's what I'm going to have to do. Here's a shortcut, so I'm not, figuring that out on my own later. So thank you so much for that. Sticking with the whole support system, structure, boundaries, that type of thing. It doesn't have to be about the time when you were working, but maybe there's some things that are still the same. But even now, you describing your rhythm for your days, seems like you have a pretty good routine in place. And I imagine that comes from having planning and different things organized. And so I'd love to hear what does your planning look like? What systems do you have in place, if any? What does organization look like that just makes it kind of flow, your homeschooling flow, and your days kind of run smoothly? I'm not trying to paint a perfect picture. I'm just curious to know, how did you get there? It sounds like you've got it pretty together, and I'd love to know, what does that look like?
Rainbows and unicorns out in our garden. My kids are always so well behaved. Everybody's always got their hair brushed and matching socks, and everything just goes perfectly smooth over here in the Morgan household. I kid. Of course not. We can wish, right? So there are some things that we do to try to mitigate the chaos during the school year and make things run a little bit more smoothly. And some of those were kind of born out of necessity when I was working, but we still do now because it's what works and it helps us have a smooth homeschool year. And one of the things, probably one of the biggest reasons for our success, I think, is that I plan our entire homeschool year in May and June. I just take the margins of the day, or I take a weekend and just, work for a couple of weeks and plan out our entire school year, so that come August, everything's ready to go. My lesson plans are made. I have printed everything we're going to need. I've sorted our books by the week we're going to need them. I have cut up any activities that we're going to need, or, crafted anything that we need for like a lesson. And I organize it. I've got 2 crates, one for the fall semester and one for the spring semester. And I have hanging file folders by week. And I literally number our weeks 1 through 40. And I put in what we are going to need each week into our hanging file folders. So on Monday mornings, all I have to do is pull out that week's folder, and I have any lessons that I had to prep in advance are right there for me. Any books that we're going to use that are from our home library are in there. Anything that needed to be printed for any lesson that we're going to be doing is there. And for that reason, we're able to pretty much stick to our lessons throughout the year. I just know myself, and I know that life gets busy, and October is always insane for us. And I know that if I was in the middle of October and I hadn't planned that week's lessons, we would just be on autopilot doing our book work, and we would do nothing extra. We would do no science lessons. We would not get to our history lessons, and art, like, you could just forget about it. Like, it just wouldn't go well. And so I just take May and June and I plan out everything. I have a supply list that I go ahead and create for things like if we have a science experiment that we're going to do and it needs 2-liter bottles, I write that on the supply list. Like, we're going to need 2-liter bottles. So on Sunday night, when I sit down to do our, meal plan or our grocery order for the week, I can remind myself, oh, I need to pick up some 2 liters this week because we're going to need those for a science experiment. We don't usually have those in our house. So, or if there's library books I know that our library has that we're going to use and we need to check out, then Sunday night I can see that on my supply list and I go ahead and put those on hold so that when we go to the library for the kids to pick out their books, I can just go ahead and grab our books that are on hold for whatever our homeschool lessons are that week. So that is probably my biggest tip for how we are able to maintain the level of rigor and academics that we do, because I've planned it all in May and June. And there are many times where I don't even remember that I planned such a lesson, and I pull it out on Monday morning and I'm like, wow, good job, Laura. This is a good lesson. Like, I just totally forgot about it. And so all year long, like, if I see something on Pinterest or if I see something on social media that I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, then I just save it. And then that following May and June, then I'm using that and plugging it into my lessons. I created my own homeschool lesson planner that I used for years and years and just started selling on Etsy because I had so many people who were asking for it, or they'd see it in my videos on Instagram and they'd ask for it. And so I put together a bundle, and that has been very helpful for me. I also try to meal plan either a month at a time or at minimum a week at a time. I really like it when I plan a month at a time, so that way on Sunday night I don't have to figure out what are we feeding all these people this week. They're always wanting to eat and I have to figure that out. So that's another system. I think just taking as many decisions off our plate during the week that we can ahead of time is, I don't know about everyone else, but I just get decision fatigue and I'm tired of making decisions and tired of planning and figuring things out. So I just try to front load that as much as possible. And so the rest of the week or the rest of the year goes more smoothly for us. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
I am absolutely obsessed with the level of planning that you do every year. I have so many questions. I'm going to try to keep them organized and succinct so that you can follow, because I'm just I need to be a fly on the wall and watch your May and June and see this happen. My first big question, and it's the biggest question, the other ones are kind of tactical, just fill in the blank of wonderings I have after you talk. But the first big one is this is why I'm I need to organize my thoughts, because I'm just so obsessed with this right now. But did you start like this? Was this what you did from year 1 of homeschooling? If not, how did you get here to I know you said you kind of had to do it out of necessity for when you were teaching and homeschooling at the same time. So maybe, it was just that pressure forced you to get there. But then the true question, those are kind of pre-questions. The real question is how do you, I don't know if the right word is trust yourself, but how are you confident, I guess confidence, trust in that that's what you're going to do all year long. Like, I think my big, it's not an issue, but maybe it is an issue. My challenge or wondering if I were to try to something like this is like, but what if I want to adjust in, November? Or what if I find something cool online, shiny object syndrome? Like, how do you stick with it? How do you stay confident? And you kind of touched on the part about sticking with it is like, you don't want to make decisions every single day or all the decisions, and I feel you on that. So that I get. Okay, so that's the big question. And then small questions like year supply list. So good. Are you building that like in May and June for all year? Like, do you have week 1 supply list, week 2 supply list, week 3 supply list laid out? So you're just pulling that out and then gathering those supplies or ordering those library books? Or are you building that each week as you pull out your plans for the week? Are you working through the supply list? And then when you said you're saving things throughout the year for your planning in May and June, where are you saving those? Is it one single source of truth, one single place where you put any ideas that come up? What are you planning from? What curriculum do you use? And then tell me about your planner. Like, how is this set up? Is that what you're using in May and June to just get everything out for the year? Or is your planner something you're writing in every week? Kind of like, if you can talk through, and of course I want the link to it to put it in the show notes, so if anybody wants to go buy it from you, but just can you give me an overview of what it looks like? So I know there's a lot of questions. I hope that you got them all. Let me quickly run back through them. So the whole confidence and trust in that this is the plan for the year and being okay with that. How did you get there? Did you start this way? The supply list question, just a little more clarity around how you're building those and when you're building those. What curriculum are you using? And then where you're saving ideas throughout the year to pull out in May and June when you plan. And then lastly, tell me more about your planner.
Really good question. I'm going to use my mental gymnastics and try to remember all the questions and answer them. Starting with, have I always done it this way? Yes, is the short answer. My first year, I was only homeschooling one child for preschool. And so I had just a simple Google Doc that I kind of planned our year out. And then my current planner, I really developed that year and then planned starting in May and June that after her first year preschool. When I knew for sure that we were going to be doing kindergarten for homeschool, then I started using that planner and have used it pretty much since then. And to your question about how do I know for sure this is what we're going to do and I'm not going to change my mind? One, I overanalyze everything and research the heck out of everything. And so I feel pretty good about what we decide on. And I know that at some point you just have to make a decision, right? Or else you'll never get started because you're just going to keep researching and trying to find the next best thing. And so I make a decision. And I will say it gets easier as your kids get older because you know what works for your family and what doesn't work. And so you find your curriculums and you find your routines and then you just stick with them and don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we use Horizons for math after third grade, we switch over to Saxon. And I talk about that on my Instagram a little bit about why we do that. But we use Horizons for math or Saxon. We use Explode the Code for phonics and 180 Days of Spelling for spelling, and then Daily Grammar or Easy Grammar for grammar. And then I kind of come up with our own writing, but once they get in 4th grade, they start doing IEW. And I really, really love IEW for writing, and I've created something similar for my 1st grader that I've just made myself to help him with the practice of writing. And then I'm trying to remember. For our family subjects, we use unit studies. So we do unit studies for history, whether that be focusing on American history or focusing on ancient world history or Middle Ages. We choose a unit study that we're going to be focusing on, or a couple that year. Like next year, we're going to be doing American history and American government, as I said earlier. And then we will choose a couple of science unit studies. So I really like The Good and the Beautiful. We've used that a lot. We've also used Learning with Friends, which I also like. My background's in history, and so I feel very confident in being able to go off the cuff and just chat with my kids about that or find good books that I think are, as unbiased as history books can be and have a diverse or inclusive representation of different perspectives. But what I need help with is science, because science is not something that's my thing. So we use, like I said, Good and the Beautiful for that. And we'll just do unit studies. So I don't actually plan out on my planner. Like on week 1, we're doing lesson 1 on Monday, lesson 2 on Tuesday, or whatever for math, grammar, spelling. I don't do that. I do like retroactive planning, I guess. So instead of writing what we're going to do during the week that we're doing it, I write down what they did. So let's say on the 3rd week of school, my kid does lesson 14 in math, then I will record they did lesson 14 in math. And that's how I use the planner for those individual subjects. Now, I do plan ahead for things like writing, what prompts we're going to be using at different parts of the school year, because I've already determined what tasks and goals I want them to have or to meet. And so then I'm shaping my own curriculum that I'm writing myself for them to be able to achieve those goals. Or, what have I noticed is their weakness and that I really want to hone in on this upcoming school year and improve on, then I can create lessons to achieve those goals. And so I do plan writing. We do plan out science. So I'll say, like, in week 13, we're doing science, Good and the Beautiful, lesson 2. Like, we do lesson 1 the previous week and lesson 2 this week. And then the next week, I would plan lesson 3. So I do plan ahead for art lessons, for science lessons, for history topics that we're going to be talking about. And I go ahead and map them out. In my planner, I have year at a glance. It's like a 1-pager with all we school for 10 months. So I have 10 months, what the calendar looks like. And then I have like a curriculum planner, like a page to plan out different curriculum for each subject, for each child. I have a unit study planner, a field trip planner. And then I would say the meat of the planner comes from the week at a glance. So I have a chart that basically has weeks 1 through 40 and then science as a column. And then I'll write out, like, what are we doing in science on each week, 1 through 40? What are we doing in history each week, 1 through 40? What are we doing in art for each of those weeks? And then I use that to create the weekly planner. So the weekly planner is a 2-page spread. It's got Monday and Tuesday on one page, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on the other page, with another section for like notes and reminders and focuses for the week. So I use the week at a glance page to plug in the weekly planner, what we're doing. So on Monday morning, I just flip to whatever week we're on in my planner, and then I'll see what we're supposed to be doing that day. And as I said, I'm retroactively writing what they did for their individual subjects, like math, like what lesson they did. I'm not planning that ahead because sometimes students work faster in math than I think they're going to, or they need some extra time. And so if I go and write, like, we're doing lesson 1 on Monday, lesson 2 on Tuesday, lesson 3 on Wednesday, and so on, it could end up being that they do lessons 1 through 3 on Monday because they were just really feeling math that day and they got ahead. Or it could be that we're having a really hard day and on Wednesday we only did half a lesson and we didn't finish. So I do not plan ahead or assign which lessons we're doing for the individual subjects, like phonics or grammar or math, but I do plan ahead for sure what we're doing for family subjects, and that keeps us on task. I will send you the link, and I'll send a coupon code for anyone who's listening if they'd like to use that to get a discount on the planner. I would love for you to use it. There's a PDF. It's 120 pages, so you can use what you want to use. You can print out multiple versions of certain pages if you'd like, and there's a link to make a copy of it and edit your own. And so you can put in your students' names. You can change which subjects you're doing, or change dates if you want to, or change colors even. You can make it your own, but you won't have to do all the work in creating the kind of spine that it's already set up to look like. So I will share that with you. Do create the supply list. So you asked about that. When I'm planning in May and June, I go ahead and decide what supplies I'm going to need each week. So I have that's actually in the planner too, in the bundle. There's a page where it just has weeks 1 through 40 listed in columns, and you have a section where you can put any supplies you might need. And so I will put those supplies as I'm planning, any books that I've like, oh, I really want to check out this book on this week because it will go with this lesson, and I will go ahead and add that into my supply list. And so I'm not doing that during the school year. Like literally on Sunday night, I sit down, I meal plan if I haven't already, and make our grocery list or order for the week. And then I look at the supply list in case there's something else I need to pick up that week for any of our lessons that we don't just usually have on hand. And I put on any library books that are on hold. So I've front loaded all that planning so that Sunday night, it should be pretty simple and easy for me. I think those are all the things that you asked. If I forgot something, ask me again. Actually, just kidding. Before you asked me something I forgot, I do remember you talking about like, how can I be confident in this? And I started to answer that, but I also want to say, like, there have been times where I thought we were going to do something. Like, for example, we were going to do Math Map. Math Map is specific to classical conversations, and it is like a new math curriculum that they have released in recent years, and they want all the kids to do it. And we gave that a go last year. We tried it. I had it in my planner, planned out for the year, and after about 3 or 4 weeks, I was like, nope, this isn't for us. I do not like it. The kids hate it. This is not going to be something we're going to do. And you know what? You are in charge, and you got permission to do what's best for your kid. And you should not feel tied to lessons that you have planned, even if they are good lessons. And so I scrapped that, and we just marked that part off in our lesson plans every week when it came time to do them. And we did something else instead, whether that be mental math or we just did math practice together as a family. So I want to give you permission that just because you go and you plan out this awesome year, if you get to the actual school year and you start doing something and you realize, you know what, this really stinks. I don't like it. I don't want to do it anymore. And the kids aren't enjoying it, and it's not helping us achieve the goals that we set up. You have permission to scrap it. No one's going to stop you from doing that. So don't be married to the plans just because you work really hard on them. You can pivot if you need to. That is what I tell myself all the time.
Okay, again, this is all so good. I am so appreciative and like selfishly so, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to test this out for a month or a quarter. This type of planning, so good. I appreciate you sharing. And it sounds like obviously you created a planner, but your planner really supports this. Like having that week at a glance sheet makes so much sense based off the way you plan. Like so good. I feel like you should put together a companion course to go with your planner. Not putting any work on you, or you're like, Erica, I just stopped working and homeschooling. I'm just trying to homeschool. But I just feel like this, I don't know if I've heard someone, at least in the interviews I've done, I have 30 episodes. Not all of them are interviews, but at least 20. And I ask, of course, always about planning and organization because, like, I love this stuff. And that's what this podcast is named, right? So I have to ask about that. And I haven't heard someone to the level of detail that you just described talk about planning in this way. I've heard people say, like, I planned out our whole year at once, but it's not this detailed. So kudos to you. And like I said, like a course or a guide or ebook or something. I feel like this is going to give a lot of people who need something like this much like pre-planning, really a great foundation. So thank you for sharing. You talked a little bit about what you do if something doesn't work and you're like, I just cross it out and like we replace it with something else. I love that, like, permission to yourself. And it's so funny that like we don't report to anyone as homeschoolers, but still we feel like guilty to ourselves, right? And accountable to ourselves, which to an extent is important, right? Like you want to make sure you are giving your children the best and not just, doing whatever. So there is but there's also like power in being able to say, nope, I'm going to
shift and pivot because this is not working. So I appreciate you saying that. What do you do if you get ahead or behind? Is it the same thing? It's probably the same thing. Okay, because I'm obsessed with this, I hope you're okay with me sticking with this topic slightly. I would love to go deeper into your family planning, and adjacent question to this is you have 3 children at 3 different grade levels, and this is another selfish question. I mean, honestly, this whole podcast is me just being like, I want to learn from everybody. So I have a 2-year-old. This year, he just turned 2 in May, so he's legit 2. But I need to start thinking about him more than I did the last 2 years, right? Because he was not, able to do anything in those last 2 years. So I want to keep it very much play and nothing too structured, but I would like to start thinking about this. So talk to me about how you homeschool with multiple kids. I think some of your family planning will come up in that, having toddlers and homeschooling, because that's a thing. I know you don't right now, but when you did, I would love to hear about your journey with that.
The course idea is a really interesting thought. I'll have to explore. I'll definitely need to pick your brain about how to produce that or what platform to host that in. But that's definitely something I'm willing to look into and is a good thought. So homeschooling multiple kids, yeah, that's hard, especially when you have babies and toddlers. I mean, more so toddlers and babies, because, babies are napping in the morning and toddlers are just dumping out all the math manipulatives into the floor and mixing them up every day. I speak from experience. My youngest, my son, he got very good at doing that every single day, and that got really old real quick, right? But yes, that I've gone through the season with homeschooling with a toddler in tow twice, and it was hard both times. So let me just encourage and reassure you that it gets better and it gets easier to homeschool multiple kids as they get older because they become more independent. And once they become fluent readers, man, that just opens up the door for so much more independence, right? With my kids, I have a daily checklist system for them. So each one has their own little checklist. I talk about it some on my Instagram, and they're laminated, and so they can use dry erase markers and check off what they have done so that way they can see what needs to come next. And so that's really helpful when they're doing their independent work. But this past year, I had a kindergartner who wasn't a fluent reader yet, and he couldn't read his checklist. And so I had to sit down with him. We had to look at the checklist together. But it does get easier once they become readers and can work independently. So you can kind of bounce around and maybe help, the oldest while the youngest is working on something. You can get the middle child started on something while you bounce back to the youngest. So that does get easier, but that is a hard season when you have multiple kids with a toddler in tow. And you're right, I understand the draw and the pull to want to do a little more and start practicing letters and reading aloud. Most people probably aren't teaching their 3-year-old reading, right? But maybe you are, and that's great, good for you. But it gets easier as they get older, so let me reassure you for that. But let them play as much as possible. Maybe you can have a small little activity for them to work on while you're working one-on-one with the older kid. And then for family subjects, they can come in. You can do fun science experiments where, the toddler can join in or the preschooler can join in and listen. It might seem like it's above their head, and that's okay. I always like to remind people that, when we start singing ABCs to 1-year-olds, that's a very abstract concept. They're not thinking about what those things are. We're just teaching them a song. We're priming them so as they get older and they start seeing letters, they're like, oh, I've heard this before. I've heard about an A or I've heard about a B. And so the same thing goes for, doing a science lesson with littles. They're not going to grasp everything, but you're priming them. So the next time you go around and you're talking about anatomy or you're talking about, earth lessons or astronomy or something, they're going to be familiar because they've heard the vocabulary before, even if they don't even know what the vocabulary is. So that kind of leads into our family subjects. So like I said, we do history. I am a history teacher by profession, and so I've broken that down into basically like 3 cycles. And so we'll do like early world history one year, we'll do modern world history the next year, and then the third year we do American history, and we just rotate it. So they're getting it more than one time. Same thing for science. We pick about 3 unit studies to do each year, and we rotate them. So like my rising 7th grader has already done these same unit studies when she was younger, but now she's getting them again. And so she's learning more this time around than she did last time. So maybe I hope that helps a little bit. And as for your question about like, if we get ahead, what do we do? It's not very often that we get ahead, but maybe we might look ahead and say, oh, let's go ahead and do this lesson for science. And that's okay. That doesn't happen very often in our house. But if we get behind, like, I try not to stress about it. I have lots of breaks built in. So if we do get behind, there's room for us to get caught up if we need to. And also in my crate system with my hanging file folders, I have a folder at the back of each one that says review or extra. And so that way, if there's something that I planned, like in week 3 that we just didn't get to, maybe someone got sick, or maybe we had an unexpected field trip with some friends or something, we just didn't get to it, I try not to sweat about it. I'll just take it and I'll put it in the back of the crate as just a review. And then towards the end of the year, when I have review time built in before we like do our end of year testing and stuff like that, and we're just kind of winding down the school year, I'll just grab that folder and I'm like, oh, we never got to this lesson, let's go ahead and do it. So that's one thing to do. And then the other thing is, if you don't get to it, it's okay, because like I said, we cycle through it. So if we don't do it this year, then a couple years from now, we can try again and do it. And maybe it'll be more age appropriate at that point and they'll grasp more. But honestly, if we don't get to it, it's not the end of the world. Like, what I have to remind myself is, there's a whole long list of things I want my children to learn, but they don't have to learn everything this year. We have them for several years of their lives, and we have time to get to all the fun things. And even if we don't get to every single thing that we planned, as long as we've cultivated this curiosity of learning, then they're going to become lifelong learners, and they'll eventually learn it if it's meant to be. So that's kind of my philosophy on that.
Okay, this is so good, and I love how you think about science and history and like just repeating, because it's so true. When you're little, you're going to be excited about, the animals and just like, oh, the noises they make or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking about my 2-year-old. And then as you get older, you might be more excited about, let's think about my 6-year-old. Like, is it a predator? Is it a prey? And like what it's eating, and more detailed questions. And I'm sure as you get older into middle school, high school, you might be thinking about its anatomy and all these different things in more depth. So like that totally makes so much sense. I think I got so excited about you planning for the whole year that I forgot to ask what curriculum you're using. And maybe I did ask that. If I did, just be like, Erica, it's in here. I already told you that. It's just not in my notes, so I might just not have written it down. But what curriculum are you using, especially history, since you are a former high school history teacher? I'm sure people would love to know, like, what do you think is good for history, and you might be creating your own stuff. So I'd love to hear that if you didn't tell me already. And then the other question I was going to ask, community. Like, let's shift gears a little bit to talk about community. And I would love to hear about this in 2 different ways, because socialization is a huge thing for homeschoolers, like, and especially people who might be listening to this who's new and like are worried about that because of all of the public worry about that. So twofold for community. One, for your children, what does their community look like? How did you find it? How do you get them involved with things? All of that. And then what's also just as important, in my opinion, is you with your community. So like other moms and moms who've come before you, all of that. And what does your community look like? How did you find your community? How do you, get support? All of that.
Since I've already talked a little bit about which curriculums we use, I will talk a little bit about our history curriculum. That is a thing that's near and dear to my heart, just as a former history teacher and someone with big opinions about how history should be taught. Unfortunately, in today's climate, the idea of teaching history is so polarizing, and there's lots of opinions about what should or shouldn't be included. And I mean, I had this opinion as a high school history teacher as well. It is tricky to teach history in a way that includes every voice. I mean, inevitably, any high school or any curriculum, not high school, but any history curriculum is going to leave out perspectives. And so I tend to try to lean towards primary sources and actual accounts from the time period, because I feel like we can learn from those and come to our own conclusions versus reading someone's take on what happened and having their own bias kind of slant that. So I try really hard to include a whole bunch of diverse perspectives when I'm talking about history with my kids, and I specifically look for books that are inclusive and that highlight perspectives that may not get talked about in mainstream culture. And so, we're doing American history this upcoming year, so I'm looking for picture books and literature that would point to Native Americans, to women, to immigrants, to children. There's some really great storybooks that are from the perspective of a child in history, and so I like using those. I like pulling up photographs and listening to music from different time periods to try to paint a more well-rounded picture of what was happening during history. And for world history, I really like Story of the World. Susan Wise Bauer is the writer of those books. It's a 4-book series or 4-volume series, and it's great. I wish there was something close to that for American history, and there may be. I just haven't found it yet, and I'm kind of picky about it. So I find myself making my own curriculum and talking more through conversation about what happened, asking good questions like what perspectives might we be missing, whose voice isn't being heard in this conversation, and bringing in children's books that are relevant to the time period, and they cross a wide span of perspectives and ideas. So that is kind of how we go about history. But of course, like I said, I have the foundational history just in my head from having a degree in American history and a degree in history and having taught it for so long. And I realized that that's not everyone's story. Like, if I had to just pull things out of my head to teach science, I would fail miserably, which is why I lean on something like The Good and the Beautiful or Learning with Friends for science. So as for community, as I said, we are part of Classical Conversations, and there are some great things about it. I love the rigor. I love the classical approach. And then there are some things I don't love about it. I don't love the cost. There is kind of a slant politically and definitely towards a Christian worldview. And there's some things about that I don't love, but for us, it's what's working. We love the people that we homeschool with in that co-op. It's a great community. And so my kids have a lot of friends through that. But we're also super active in our community. And so we work with Welcome House. It's a refugee ministry. And the kids are involved with swim and baseball and a local kids theater company. And so they have lots of friends, lots of neighbor friends. I worried a lot about community and will they be socialized enough? Will they be, normal kids? And I worried about that, and that has definitely not been an issue at all for our house. In fact, my kids would probably talk to the doorknob if they had no one else to talk to. They're always talking and making friends with somebody, and so that has not panned out to be an issue that I actually had to worry about, which has been great. They have lots of friends, a huge tribe, and have had no trouble making friends. And for me, I have a really strong core group of friends from college that I keep in touch with, and have several of those girls that live in town. And we are involved with our church, and so I have lots of friends. And then the interesting thing is very few of them homeschool. My sister-in-law homeschools, so she's a great support there. And I would say that most of our friends actually are not homeschoolers. And so in our homeschool community, our classical conversations community, I have just gained really valuable friendships, especially with the veteran moms who've been doing this a really long time and have already graduated kids and have just paved the way and figured all the hard things out ahead of me so that they could share. And I'm just so incredibly thankful and grateful for all the advice that they have given me, not just like when I first started out homeschooling. They were a wealth of knowledge then, but even now, like to be able to go to them and be like, hey, I'm noticing that I'm having this issue with one of my children. Do you have any ideas? And, they're able to share, or they know someone else who has been through something similar and they can share. And just, I find that having people that you trust who you can see the fruits of their homeschool through their students and how, successful their students have been, whether that be academically or in just having great character or being very mature and responsible young people, to see these other families that have done the work and have the results to show for it, and to be able to go to those moms and say like, hey, I need help on this, and then just hear what they've done, has just been such a huge asset to be able to have in my life. And I'm just so incredibly thankful for all the moms who have gone before us and who can tell us just the bits and pieces of things that they've learned and experienced. And for us to be able to pay that forward to the moms that are coming up after us. And so, yeah, we have a huge tribe, very supportive. And I'm just so thankful to be able to do life with all of the people in our tribe, whether they're homeschoolers or not.
Thank you for sharing how you think about history. So good and so helpful. Story of the world. I'm hearing that twice now in the same day. So I'm like, maybe I need to look into this. This is what we do as homeschoolers. At least I need to not be like, oh, shiny object. Anyways, I'm cracking up at you saying that your kids will probably talk to doorknobs and that they just make friends. I love that so much. And I love that you have a strong community. I love that they have a strong community. That's so good. Going back to something you mentioned like super early on in one of your earlier voice notes that I noted because I wanted to make sure I talked about it. Tell me about your oldest daughter starting a business. Like, what's her business? How did she start it? I think you mentioned what it was, but how did she start it? What did you do to support her? Tell me about that, because both myself and my husband are very entrepreneurial and have different like ventures and things happening. And my son, I see it already in him. And so he's 6 now, so I'm looking forward to starting to like nurture that and support him. So definitely want to learn from you and from your daughter, and to just like shout her out. Like if she has any social media, where folks can support her, that type of thing. I don't know, but just would love to hear that piece too.
Yes, so my oldest daughter is about to turn 12 this week, actually, and she has always expressed interest in starting a business or selling things to make money. She gets really excited about that. I mean, she was like in kindergarten and she was like, I want to start Katie's art boutique. I'm going to sell my artwork, or she wanted to do lemonade stands. She's always very interested in that. And so I think probably when she was in 2nd grade, we did the Your Business math. It's through Simply Charlotte Mason. And it's like, it teaches math from the perspective of managing a business. So looking at inventory and, cost and taxes and things like that. So there's 3 different kinds that you could do. It's like a bookstore, I think a fish store, and a sports store. And so we got her one of those, and then she would do that in addition to her regular math. It was just for fun. And very quickly she was like, no, I want to do a real business. I know I can figure this out. Let's do a real business. And every year our homeschool group does a entrepreneur day, and so on entrepreneur day the kids can bring in stuff to sell to their peers and just the parents and families. And so one year she decided to make jewelry, and so I think we loaned her about $100 to get some beads and polymer clay and get all the tools used for making the jewelry. And she very quickly paid us back because she made a pretty good amount of money that first couple of months and was able to pay us back quickly and reinvest into her business. She recruited her sister to help, and her granddad helped build, her display boards for the earrings, and it's just really precious. And it was such a success, and the jewelry was so cute that we had lots of family and friends asking to buy things. And so we made a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and they are also selling on Etsy. They have done many vendor fairs since then. One of the groups that we're a part of is called the Eastern North Carolina Kids Market, and they will host a kids market once or twice a year, and we participate in those, where it's not just homeschoolers, but kids under the age of 18 that have a business. They're selling things and making things to sell, and we have a couple local places in our community that are willing to host those, and we advertise to the public and people come. So they've done that several times. They have done just adult vendor fairs around Christmas. They've done several, and they've done really, really well, especially considering that, it's a 9-year-old and 11-year-old, and I think this is their third year selling jewelry now. And so we're super proud of them. It's been a great experience because they've learned to manage their money. They've learned to reinvest money into their business, and it's just been great. Time management. It's also a creative outlet. It teaches them to talk to grown-ups and market themselves at vendor fairs. They have adults coming up to them asking questions about their jewelry and how they make it, and they're able to talk to them, and all kinds of great social skills for them to learn. So it's been great. I highly recommend any parent who has children who are interested in making money and have any kind of entrepreneurial inkling to really nurture that, because it's been such a great learning experience for them. And so you can find them all their socials are Morgan Made or The Morgan Made, and then you'll see a little logo. I'll be sure to share it with you so you can share it in the show notes. But it's a logo with 3 earrings. There's a big earring in the middle to represent me, the mom, and then 2 earrings on either side to represent my oldest and my middle daughter as they sell their things. So they're on Etsy. The Morgan Made is actually the same place I sell my planners. I get the money for the planners, but they get the money for all of their jewelry and all the things they've sold. They've sold stationery, they've sold prayer beads, they've sold earrings and bracelets, of course, a lot of custom jewelry. So yes, be sure to check them out. They love it. They've shipped their jewelry all over the country, and it's been great for them and fun to watch as they do it.
Okay, you are raising a whole entrepreneur, 2 entrepreneurs, because I just checked out their Etsy shop, and I am eyeing these gold and white earrings. This jewelry is so cute, and they're graphics, they have this set up better than many adults. I'm seriously impressed, and I'm scrolling as I'm talking because it's just so awesome. 3 5-star reviews, just chef's gifts, and 1 was just this month, so absolutely killing it. I'm obsessed. I love this so much, and thank you for dropping the entrepreneur math curriculum or resource. I am eyeing that too, because I have been wanting to buy something to just make this easy for me, but I haven't heard a lot of recommendations, so I'm just gonna go ahead and grab this. So thank you for that. This is so good. I don't even have anything to say other than everybody needs to check them out. Okay, I have 2 questions that are similar. I don't know if they're similar. They're actually not very similar. They're kind of different, but if you wouldn't mind answering both of them. What was something that you worried about? You've been in this 8 years. So the beginning, what, I don't know, it's shifted, but what was a worry that you had in the beginning of homeschooling that is no longer a worry? And then what are some things that are just bringing you joy in homeschooling right now? They can be big or small. And then we'll wrap up after those 2 questions.
So when we first started out, I think everyone, one of my fears or worries was, are they going to have friends? Are they going to be socially awkward? And then of course, will I do a good enough job? Will they fall behind? What if they have to go back to school and they're not at the right place? all the concerns, like, am I sufficient? Will this be the best choice for our family? What if it's not? And after doing this for 8 years, I can say with confidence, my children have no problem making friends, as I've talked about. They have lots of friends. I don't think they're any more socially awkward than I am. They're probably less socially awkward than I am. So that's good. And they are excelling with school. They are thriving. And I feel very confident that if they were to go back to school, they would be ahead of their friends in some areas and maybe a little behind in others, but they have the skill sets needed to thrive and to work hard and to persevere through things to get wherever, a school would deem them needing to be. But I think they're doing great, and I've seen the benefit because, like, one of my children has struggled with learning, especially writing, and definitely has some ADHD tendencies, but has excellent behavior. And so I know that if this child was in a school system, they would likely fly under the radar, and the learning disabilities either would not be addressed or wouldn't be diagnosed, and the child would struggle probably in school. But because we're at home, I was able to identify what's going on, make the right accommodations, and really work with the child to help them thrive through the learning differences. So I'm thankful for that. And things that are bringing me joy right now. I know you specifically asked homeschool. What's bringing me joy in homeschool? So we're on break right now, and that's bringing me joy for summer break. But I also have this screen-free checklist. And so every morning when the kids wake up, they cannot get on screens until they have done 30 minutes of something creative, 2 chores, 30 minutes of physical activity or being outside, made their bed and tidied their room, and then, of course, gotten ready, brushed teeth, and eat breakfast. All those things have to be done before they can get their screens, and they have a limited amount of screen time. And so that has been nice because, we've been waking up and, like, everyone's doing chores without being asked, and it's so nice. I'm like, wow, look at this. Imagine if we were like this every day, guys. This is not bringing them joy, but it's bringing me joy. So that's been great. Also, we recently got some magnetic phonics tiles, and I don't know where these have been my whole life, but they are awesome, and I'm really liking them. We're doing a little bit of school during the summer, just, reading practice and a little bit of writing practice, and my oldest is working on drawing the world because she'll have to do that next year in her classical conversations class at the end of 7th grade. They have to draw the world from memory. So she's been practicing maps a little bit each day, and she's got some summer reading. So anyways, I've been working with my youngest on some phonics a little bit here and there throughout the summer, and I got these tiles, and he loves them. It helps him to spell words and review, like, just different phonic rules, and man, it is great. I really love it, and it brings me joy. So, and then other than that, just the summertime and being able to go to the beach, and we just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary, doing all the summer things, pool and popsicles, and I just love summer. It's my favorite season. You cannot convince me otherwise. It's the best. So those are things bringing me joy. Erica, what's bringing you joy? You've asked me all the questions, and I'd love to know what's bringing you joy in your homeschool life and just in life in general.
Oh my goodness, I'm cracking up at you asking me the question and I have an answer. So I'll share it in a second, but I love your transition from what you previously thought, worried about, and now. And I think that it definitely just comes with time. We're going into our 3rd year, so we still are fairly new in homeschooling. But even as, like, a former teacher, former principal, I still had some of those worries, and I see how they're, like, slowly, they're still there. They're not gone completely, but I'm just more comfortable in it, especially, like, the socialization. I just actually had a moment today at the pool where I was just like, my son was, like, playing by himself, and I was just like, it's fine. He has friends. I feel like if that was 2 years ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, is he not socialized? So funny. But love things that are bringing you joy right now. In terms of things that are bringing me joy right now, I definitely echo summertime, like getting to the pool and just being outside more. And we had friends over for a splash pad play in our backyard. So definitely summertime things. And homeschooling wise, I'm like very happy with what we're doing over the summer. We're continuing some ELA work and the curriculum. While my son is like not totally into it, but it's because he doesn't want to stop playing. Because when we sit down, he's like, oh, like he's interested in the stories. He's like, I know this, like it's one of those things, like you don't want to stop doing what you're doing, but then when you do the other thing, you're like, oh, this is actually fun. I like this. So I'm happy with that. He's been getting into Beast Academy more. Oh, and the curriculum we're using is Core Knowledge for ELA. And then Beast Academy, we've had the subscription all year, but we didn't use it as much as I probably would want to. And so now over the summer, he's been doing it more kind of just as fun. And he's like really excited about 3-digit numbers, because in our first grade curriculum it didn't get to 3-digit numbers, so now in Beast Academy it does, and he's like, oh wow, like he's really excited about that. And he's been adding and subtracting them and like mentally, so that's awesome. And then we are testing out Mystery Science. They have a free trial this summer, and he's like super into that too. We're doing the unit on animal superpowers, and he's like very excited about that. And we're just doing it like we took breaks. We're not like super, like going super hard, but he's just into it, and I'm excited about that. And then the other part of homeschooling that I'm loving right now is just the community. Like these podcasts are really fun for me to be chatting with everybody, and I'm about to open up the third round of a group. I'm calling it Ready 2026, but I've been planning with homeschool moms to get ready for next year, and we did a May group, a June group, we're about to start a July group, and that has been like super fun for me. So yeah, a lot of those things bringing me joy. So thank you for asking. Okay, last question I have for you. Well, two-part questions. Like any last pieces of advice you would give to homeschooling moms, maybe new, maybe veteran, whoever. And then anything we didn't get to talk about that you wanted to talk about, definitely touch on it now. If nothing more, that's totally fine. I feel like we talked about a lot of really good stuff. So yeah, those are my last two questions.
Love that your kid's excited about doing 3-digit addition. That's so awesome. I remember when you were talking, I had this memory of when my oldest was doing 2-digit, not multiplication, addition in first grade, I guess. And I just had this moment of, oh my goodness, I grew this human from a little tiny thought into a baby, and I kept her alive with my body for 6 months. And now here she is. Not only does she know what numbers are and what they mean, but like she can add and she can put like 2-digit addition together and like carry and regroup, and her brain is so beautiful. And oh my gosh, this is so wild. So I love that your son is excited about the addition. That's so fun. I loved hearing about what's bringing you joy. That brought me joy too. Okay, 3 pieces of advice that have been shared with me, and I will share with everyone else. So first one, this really applies to all moms, but especially like the moms that are like preschool, kindergarten age, who are doing like the cutest activities and planning the cutest lessons, and everything is Instagram worthy and Pinterest worthy. And my advice to that is, if it takes you longer to make it than it is going to take them to do it, don't. I think we lived in this world of like everything has to be beautiful because that's what we see on social media, which is great. It's inspiring. The creativity gets, your juices flowing, you're excited. But I learned very quickly that it is not a good use of time to plan an elaborate, beautiful activity that takes more time for me to make than it takes for the child to do. So that's my first piece of advice. Don't do that. My second part is, I imagine that most people who are listening to the Organized Homeschool or follow you are planners and get excited about planning. And as a fellow planner myself, one thing I've had to learn is not to over plan. So I get very excited. I have a plan for every single day, every single lesson, every single, subject, and I have learned to plan for pockets of nothing. So leave things blank. Say, I don't have a lesson for this activity, or I don't have a lesson for this day, or I do, but I'm going to intentionally leave this open because there will always be days that you need to catch up. Like, that's just how it is. Someone gets sick, you go on a spontaneous field trip or meet up with some friends. And so plan for days that have nothing so that you can catch up if you need to. And then if you don't have anything to catch up on, that's awesome. You have a short day, and that's great too. And then my last thing is our family mantra. So if you don't have a family mantra, think about what yours might be. And ours is always, this is what I say to my kids as I drop them off at practice, as we're, parting ways. This is what we say to each other. Be kind, include others, do your best, and be a good human. So that's what we say as they're running out the door. Be kind, include others, do your best, be a good human. I love you. Have fun. That's what we say as we do drop-offs for activities. And at the end of the day, I just have to remember, if that's all my kids do, then I will have done exactly what I needed to do as a parent. The academics and the sports and all the other accolades can come in or not, but they're just gravy as long as my family is representing those values that we hold dear. So anyways, I hope that the rest of your interviews go well. I cannot wait to listen to all the other episodes. I hear your excitement in talking about them, and I can't wait to listen. So thank you so much for having me on and starting this new friendship. I just love it so much, and I can't wait to hear what everyone else has to say.
These are such good pieces of advice. Thank you so much for that and everything else that you've shared. Last thing I have for you is please tell everybody where they can find you, get in touch with you, whatever, follow up on questions I might have, because I already know people are going to be like, well, yes, I need to follow Laura and learn more from her. So please share that. And then if there's anything you have going on that you want people to know about, please share that now. And yes, that's all.
You can find me on Instagram at Rivercrest Homeschool. I'd love to connect. Feel free to DM or just check out the minutia of our homeschool day. We like to share some of our favorite activities and just things we're doing during the week and activities we have going on in our life, some little garden updates and things that bring joy and beauty into this life that we have. I also share about my homeschool planning system and my planner, which you can find on Etsy. Don't forget my daughter's jewelry business, The Morgan Maid, and they allow me to post my planner for sale on their Etsy page. And so don't forget the coupon code that I shared with Erica. It'll be in the show notes, I think. So if you're interested in the planner, feel free to grab that coupon code. And I appreciate this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I like the format, and I can't wait to listen to all the other episodes.
Thank you so much, Laura. This has been so awesome. I can't wait to share the episode and everyone else to get to hear from you and all the awesome things that you're doing and advice that you shared. And I'm so excited to keep in touch and keep following you on social media. Let's definitely, stay in touch. Maybe we have a part 2 at some point because this was really fun. Thanks so much again, and talk to you soon. Bye.